Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 125. Darkness Ascends. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're diving into the story told in Foundation Season 3, and there will be spoilers. If you have not seen Foundation, any of the seasons, there are plenty of fabulous podcast episodes that we have in our backlist. Go find one of something that you're interested in, listen to that, and then go watch Foundation, because this is a good series. How you doing today, Mike?
Hi, I'm jolted still from the ending of the last season of Foundation.
OMG. I'm with you.
Yeah, but otherwise I'm doing good.
Okay, good. So should we just launch into talking about this, or would you like to talk about your writing world?
We can just launch into this. I think
Okay.
we can just get into it.
Okay, so for those who are used to our usual format, we decided today we are not going to do our usual format because there is so much to unpack in this season of Foundation that doing the whole what did you like, what would you change is probably not going to work as much as just a conversation about the depth and intricacy of this series. So I'm going to go ahead and read the very brief and very unsatisfying description that's on IMDb for this series. Again, we're going to be talking about this in depth, and there will be spoilers. A complex saga of humans scattered on planets throughout the galaxy, all living under the rule of the Galactic Empire. So does not cover the depth and details of this.
That was it? That's the whole thing?
That's it. That's the best one I could find. All right, let's talk about this. What do you want to talk about first? And you said you were left shocked. Yes. I was like clutching a pillow for the last 3 or 4 episodes. They were it got progressively darker and darker.
Yeah, it was so intense.
Intense.
I wasn't sure coming into this season. Like, I really liked the first season so much, the first 2 seasons so much.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, how are they going to keep this going? And it did not disappoint for me.
No, it didn't.
The writing was so spot on. There was just great pacing, even when there were moments where it slowed down and we just see characters talking about their feelings and their concerns and the quandaries they're facing. It's every moment is important. And then we get moments of suspense or action or horror or intensity. Yeah, it was... I'm trying to talk general now. We'll get into specifics, I guess, in a bit. But I was blown away. Yeah. Why don't you go?
Okay, all right. When I was thinking about this podcast that we were going to be doing and about this season and talking about the way we usually structure our podcasts, I did kind of break some things out. And one of the things that I landed on that I wanted to talk to you about is how believable these characters are. They are so real. And I can't figure out how they're doing it. And I think it's because what you said, everything they say is important. Not in a pay attention to this, it's a foreshadowing thing,
right,
but in that it is either thematically important, it's plot related important, it's character arc important, all of these different ways that every single thing that they do and every single thing that they say is part of the weaving of this story is just amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it.
I think that's such a hugely important part of this show because this could easily be just, it's an epic sci-fi show, right? So we're talking
Yeah.
about grand timescales and grand, covering of space. It's a whole galaxy that we're discussing, multiple planets, people coming and going, civilizations rising and falling. And it could have been so abstract, but they do such a good job of personalizing it and
a-
making each character important.
and
And
grounding it in those characters.
yeah, and I noticed particularly in this season, and I think it goes through all the seasons, but I really noticed it here, especially as we came up to the end of the season and such dramatic things happen. All of the motivations of these characters make sense.
Yes.
You
Yes.
you may be rooting for a character or rooting against a character, but you know why they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know the lengths that they're going to be, to the hard decisions that they're making, and the deep or dark strides that they're taking, all fall in line with the character that has come before.
Yeah.
And they're so important because there's a lot of events that happen at the end of this that could have just been ridiculous or out of the blue. And I think it wasn't. It made sense why these characters did what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I think that is really amazing what they do is that because this is a story that spans centuries, placed in a world that spans millennia, and yet every person that you meet feels fresh and new. It doesn't feel like it's a recycling of a different or the same kind of character. And
Yeah.
where you see that most dramatically is this whole idea of empire, right? The rulers of this galactic empire are three clones who are in various stages of their maturity. The youngest is Dawn. The sort of middle-aged, from like 20s or 25 through to the 50s is Day, and then the elder statesman is Dusk. And we've seen iterations of Dawn and Day and Dusk throughout this series, and they're all different. And they all have different motivations, and it's amazing to see. And they're played by the same actors. So we've got these incredibly skilled people who are performing in a similar person, but also a different person. It's just astonishing.
Yeah, I had that exact same note. It's such a joy to see how each generation of these characters are often so different from the other ones. And at the same time, I think it was such a brilliant decision on the writer's part to have these characters in Dawn, Day, and Dusk carry through from season to season and from generation to generation so that we have this touchstone of what Empire is throughout the seasons. Because otherwise it would just be a new person every time. You're like, okay, I don't have any connection to these people. I don't understand how this, how things have changed from the previous seasons or from the previous episodes, if there's a time jump. And we get this sort of pseudo continuity, right? With this concept that Cleon is carrying through into the future. But at the same time, it allows them to have a different personality for each of those characters. And it just works so well.
It really does. And one of the things that I took note of this season was there's a moment where Day, who I started to call Lebowski Day, because he's got a very dude vibe going. He's got a very dude vibe going. Okay, this is the iteration of the leader of the Empire who has the control. He's the one that makes the major decisions. Right? Dawn is like in training, and Dusk is the elder statesman who provides counsel. But Day is like, when Day ascends, Day's the one who's in charge. And this particular Day has eschewed being in charge. He is hanging out and smoking dope, and he's got a cute girlfriend, and he's, peace, love, dope, very much, mellow kind of guy who's just hanging out and doing his dude thing with long hair, etc. And Yeah, and so he decides that, and so his girlfriend gets sent away by Demerzel, who we know is a robot, because she discovers Demerzel is a robot. And nobody's supposed to know that, and so Demerzel wipes her memories and sends her away, and he wants her back. Her name is Song. He wants Song back, so he goes to the essentially holographic archives of the history of his, predecessors, and he talks to a previous day about the time that he went and invaded Song's homeworld. And you can see the difference between these Cleons, right? That day is arrogant and
Yep.
self-possessed and, disdainful, next to Lebowski Day, who's like, just tell me the story, dude. I mean, it's just amazing. And both performed by the same actor. And tying in exactly what you just said, we're reminded of what the Cleons used to be like. And now we've got this. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, staying on the topic of Day, because I think he was such an interesting character this time. I mean, each season he was, but to see the difference, and you kind of get the sense of the impending fall of Empire, right? Right from the beginning of the season, you're like, okay, all is not right in Empire now, and to see that exemplified with his character. And it's so interesting to see how he transforms over the course of the season, right? First we see, this Cleon who's been so cold and so ruthless in previous seasons and previous generations. Now we see that he's fallen in love with someone. And at the start, he's talking about Demerzel as a robot, right? He's tied to his humanity, and he sees Demerzel as just an it. And then by the end of the season, his humanity has extended into love for that robot, love for that other sentient, sapient being, and wanting to save her, and seeing that as a possible avenue to even saving humanity, or saving the Foundation, but saving the Empire, or at least, the species from falling into darkness. And he comes full circle in a way. And to see that transformation was just phenomenal. It's so well written.
Yeah.
And he had to give up all of Empire to finally realize that. There's so much nuance there. I think they just did it so well.
It's fascinating. And in the same way, we see this with Dawn and Dusk as well, right? We've seen Dawn go rogue before, but it's been in a sort of naive kind of way. And in a seeking way, in a something's missing kind of way. And this Dawn went rogue because he said, we need to fix this. So they were Day and Dawn were almost on the same page. They got there at different times, but they're on the same page. We've got to stop the destruction of the universe and of civilization. And so this Dawn was more self-possessed than any Dawn we've seen before.
Yeah. And the interplay between those characters was great. And again, because Day at the start of this, they bring him in and they're telling him that everything basically ends in 4 months. After that, they don't know what's going on. They pretty much know that the Emperor is going to fall at some point, and now it may be not only within their lifetimes, but months away. And he just basically shrugs. He's like, okay, whatever. I'm going back to do my thing. He doesn't care. And then he ends up coming around to like, oh, wait, we can save this. We've got to save this. And that whole thread was amazing, especially when we get toward the end and we're rooting for Day to stop Dusk and to save Demerzel, right?
Yeah.
We see the hope there. It's right within grasp. And then he just fails. It's heartbreaking.
Yep.
But this is the fall of Empire. We knew this was coming. They told us this was coming. That's what this whole show is about. Something like this was inevitable, and to see
and yet we don't want it to happen, which is
you don't
bizarre.
want it to happen in that moment. There's a sense of hope. You don't want it to happen, and it's just heart-wrenching.
It is, because at the very beginning of the series, we did want it to happen.
Yeah,
we
you're
were
like,
rooting for Harry Seldon, and we were like,
exactly,
Harry's right. You guys are going to end.
Yes. Yeah, you're like, this is a horrible setup. This has got to go.
Yep.
It was just it was just wonderful seeing that moment, seeing the fall of Empire, and I was really hoping we would get to see it in the show because it's such a vast time span. Maybe you never actually get to it, but if not the actual fall, this is certainly the beginning of the end. Or I mean, I guess it's past the beginning of the end. It's pretty much near the end of the end, probably.
Yeah.
But it was just wonderful to see it because it was what was promised, and seeing it was simultaneously shocking and satisfying and horrific. And it was just, it all came together so well.
Yeah.
Oh,
what did you think of Dusk's evolution? This particular Dusk, he evolved right before our eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of went the opposite trajectory, right?
Yeah.
He was like, oh, we can save this, we can do something. And then I think it took both. Before I knew what happened, I thought, oh, it's interesting because they have Dawn going with Gale to try to say something, and Day is just giving up and going this, fine song and try to salvage what time he can there, right? Live in his bliss. And both of them basically fled at the exact same time, and they were gone. Yeah. And that pushed Dusk into this sort of mad self-preservation mode.
Well, he was already kind of there, though, because he was kind of begging Demerzel to kind of change the timeline because everything ends in 4 months. Don't you really need me?
Yeah. Which, again, going back to character motivation, it made perfect sense. I kind of agreed with him. I'm like, why are you throwing him into the evaporation chamber when this crisis is here? You just keep him alive for another few months at least to see what happens. Maybe he can help. He presumably has some experience that could be at play. So you get it. And they built his character up that way where it's like, hey, I'm necessary here, right? And they kind of pushed him more and more over the course of the season to feel that, right? Everything's sort of crumbling around him and falling apart, and of course he felt like he was necessary. Of course he felt like he was needed. And initially you get the feeling like, oh, he's not so bad. He cares about Day. He's, looking forward to...
He was very fond of Dawn.
Yeah, sorry, Dawn. That's what I meant. It was Dawn, yeah. And then at the same time, there's this darkness of, oh, on his spare time, he built the Death Star, basically. and you're like, okay, well, maybe he's still got that Cleon in him, right? That's still that utter ruthlessness. So you see both parts of it there. It's not like it's a surprise he becomes what he is at the end, but he definitely goes kind of overboard, perhaps.
Yeah.
But he's believable.
And he's raging against the dying of the light, and he's going to take everybody with him.
Yeah, he's against his own death and the fall of the Empire at the same time.
That's, like I said, that's where you're just left shell-shocked by what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other characters. We've got the Mule, who seemed a little OP to me, and now we know why.
Yeah.
We've got Gale, who also seems a little OP to me. OP being overpowered.
Yeah.
And especially in comparison to the Cleons, right? So up to this point in this series, the Cleons have held all the power, and the Foundation and Gale have been the underdogs. And now all of a sudden you see that switched, where the Cleons seem to be just, the power's just slipping away from them. And 2 out of 3 of them one of them ends up dead, and the other one ends up essentially almost dead. They're completely powerless. And to be honest, Dusk, who's now Brother Darkness, and I think Quint, the ambassador, the Foundation ambassador, who essentially said to him, "You're just a scared man screaming into the void."
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing what she said. She's totally got it pegged. He thinks he's got power, but he doesn't. His power is based on fear that he's generating in other people, and the fear that's driving him. And so he also is, because of that framework of fear within which he's operating, he's very powerless as well. And so it's very interesting to me how the powers kind of shifted hands here.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense that Gale was OP. So I'm curious to hear what you think about that, because I felt like they used the gap in time pretty well. Like, okay, the Foundation has grown, it's expanded out into multiple planets, it's sort of become its own empire, right? They've shown that it's
Yeah.
a bit autocratic itself now. It's got its own civil war brewing. And then, but there is a power structure there, right? They have these whisper ships that can zip around the galaxy. So they have elements that the Empire doesn't. But her personally, she has a power that other people don't. She can project herself into people's minds. So they think they're shooting her, but she's not actually there, and she comes up behind them. I think that was used really well.
I don't disagree about that. I was actually thinking about how she was in physically fighting with the mule. It just that was not part of her character before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually will agree with that now that I think about it. I think that could have been something, in the approved section where they could have shown her training, perhaps.
Yeah.
In some
or maybe they
flashback or something.
Or just taking it out. Yeah, taking it out altogether and just have her use her mental powers.
Yeah.
Mental versus mental. I think it would have been fine. But I was sort of like,
I did like how they showed us how she was buttressing her mind against him by having the people around her, basically the memory of those people being her support. I thought that was really smart and really well done.
Yeah, I like that too. That I didn't have a problem with at all. I was just sort of like, really? She's going to go in there and start swinging her fists? This is not what she's ever done before. She's a mathematician.
Right.
And the same way for the mule. The mule seemed to be so unbeatable in so many ways. It kind of made him a little two-dimensional. And the only thing that they did that gave him some depth was him waking up to nightmares. But then they didn't give us enough. I think that a little bit more of that to kind of help us with those. And what they did was gave us backstory instead. But it still didn't, I think, for me, create some dimension. He just seemed to be so overpowered as far as his abilities and what he was doing.
Yeah, I think that was intentional because of where they went with it.
Yes. What'd you think of that?
And who the mule ultimately was, at least so far as we know. Okay, so let's talk about the mule a little bit here. And everyone else who's read Foundation kind of knew, like, okay, this guy's not the mule, because there's a twist in the books. Spoiler alert on the books too. I'll mention what happens in the books if you're going to read the books. It's not the same as the show, but in the books, the mule ends up actually being the Magnifico character, the Jester character.
And that's who I thought it was.
Yeah, and they were clearly like hinting at that.
Yeah.
And then obviously they're like, oh, we can't just do that because everyone who's read the books knows that's who it's going to be. So, they went to a different character. It was interesting. It was interesting that they twisted it in that sense. And I really liked that they used the Magnifico music against her.
Yeah.
At the end. Yeah. Because they set that up, and I'm like, I wonder where they're going with this. It's like, oh, his music is somehow going to affect things. And then it did. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That paid off. That was clever. But I agree. The mule as a character was sort of felt one-dimensional and overpowerful, but I think they needed to have that, because if it was a slower build and like, oh, here's this character who's kind of causing trouble, I don't think it would have been taken as seriously. They wouldn't have been able to fit it in one season. They would have probably had to drag that out more. I think it needed to be like, this character is an immediate threat and can pretty much take over a planet at will. I think if you had that ability, you could pretty much do what you want. Who's going to stop you? The only people who are going to stop you are people who have the same ability, or if you have the Death Star and you can destroy the planet from another part of the galaxy. I think those setups for me.
Yeah, I agree. So, other thoughts?
Yeah, so there was another aspect to this season that I thought was really cool, which was the revelation of different elements of backstory.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just me forgetting some things that happened in the first two seasons. So correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but I do not remember that Demerzel plotted the takedown of the space elevator in the first season.
They never said that, but I knew that she did it. There was one scene in the very first season where she's standing and looking at the elevator. And I remember thinking, what has she done? Right, there was just
Okay.
a little bit of a linger with the camera on her, and then, of course, then it never came back to it. So, yes,
Yeah.
they never said that outright, but they kind of hinted at it
They
with
hinted
just a
at
little
it.
bit of camera work. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. And it fits perfectly with okay, so you're familiar with Asimov's three laws of robotics. I think they
Yes,
explicitly stated them in this season.
yes,
And that was one of the cool things in the books was the zeroth law, which was the robots sort of took it upon themselves because they realized there was always this conflict of we're trying to protect this particular human or this group of humans, but if we don't protect the whole species, we can't do that. So they sort of came up with their own zeroth law, which is you have to protect humanity. And then that became the most important law, right? The zeroth one, because
okay,
it had to. So all the other laws were important so long as they didn't conflict with the zeroth law in protection of the species. So that requires you to do some horrible things, like taking down a space elevator and killing, 100 million people or whatever, right? Because you're doing it for the larger salvation of humanity as a whole. So it overrides protection of any individual. Kind of the opposite of the Star Trek thing, right? Sometimes the needs of the
yeah,
one outweigh the needs of the many. This is the complete opposite of that. The needs of the many always outweigh the needs of the one in this case. That's the zeroth law. So seeing that in action, seeing the horrific scale of that was pretty shocking, but that's how it would be. It's exactly how it would be. And even we see Gail Dornick do the same thing. She sacrificed an entire planet to try to save the Foundation's plan for the whole galaxy. And that
yeah.
kind of scale is hard to wrap your head around, right? That level of sacrifice is brutal and shocking, but again, makes sense given their plans, right? Given Demerzel's plan. Okay, so anyway, that's a backstory thing that I didn't get was with the space elevator. Another thing was her giving Harry Seldon the history he needed to complete his work. I don't
Yeah, that
remember
was
that. Was
fascinating.
that something that came up before?
No, not that I recall.
I don't remember that either, but that was also really brilliant because it makes sense. And it was a huge surprise that, she actually knew about this foundation and she was like working with it because again, the zeroth law required her to focus on humanity as a whole. So of course, as soon as she found out about that, she would dive into it and try to at least look at the math to see if it was valid and see if that's how she had to go. So that all made complete sense. It was just really smart.
I agree. There were so many threads for this. I really, they're going to go into a season 4, and this feels to me like the run up to the climax. So that season 4 will be the last season for this, which would make sense. And I'm really hoping that all these threads that they've been weaving so beautifully so far really get resolved in a satisfying way.
Yeah.
There are some very interesting things. So again, spoilers, people, we lose Demerzel at the end of this season, but do we? Because her light didn't go out.
Right. Yeah, I'm wondering about not only that, but also if this is the end of Empire, are we never going to see Day and Dusk again? Are they just gone now? Or,
Well, here's the thing. Dusk is still there. Now he's Brother Darkness, right?
I meant Dawn and Day.
Dawn is still alive. He's, badly wounded, but he's still alive. And I don't know if you noticed, but when we saw the very last scene with what appears to be 2 robots, I could have sworn that was Lee Pace's voice in the male robot. Wouldn't it be fascinating if somehow Cleon was a robot?
That would be very interesting.
It would be.
But yeah, that's right. Anyway. Dawn is still out there. Yeah. Well, presumably because the mule obviously could have killed him at any point.
Right. Exactly.
Or taken him over, which she didn't, at least up to that point.
Right.
So, yeah, he may end up being a pawn, or who knows.
Very interesting, and I loved the twist at the end where they show us Earth.
Yeah, so that's something. I mean, having read the books, that's something I'm curious to see how they play out because there's a book called Foundation and Earth, which is one of the later books in the series.
Okay.
Which has some very interesting elements to it. So I'm wondering if they're going to have that in, or if that's just inspired where they're going to go. And there's also the kind of we see the male-ish robot at the end that you mentioned, and then we see the woman who I forget her name, but it seems
Krell? Is that right?
that sounds right. Seems like she's a
Or girl?
robot as well, right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
like
That seemed to be the implication.
some kind. It seems like there was this, back in the day when the robots were there, they became vastly more technologically superior, right? And had the ability to look at things 4 or 5 dimensions or whatever. And that's how they created the vault. And that's how they created the cube thing. I forget what it's called now.
The radiant.
Yeah, the radiant, the prime radiant. So so there's, and brought Harry back to physical life. They obviously like are superior to where the humans are in this timeline. So it's possible to me that they have some kind of grander plan even than Foundation had. They already knew this stuff ahead of time, and all this is like part of their thing. I don't know, because she said like pieces are coming into place now, so it seems like they kind of have predicted this even.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is that in 1 or 2 episodes, characters talked about backup plans. And it would be
Yeah.
very surprising to me that Demerzel wouldn't have a backup plan for the clones and a backup plan for herself.
Yeah. That's an interesting aspect to her character, right? Because she's torn between different things, right? She wants to ensure the survival of humanity. She wants to resurrect robots, but she's limited by her programming to love and support the Cleon dynasty. And
Yeah.
those things are at odds with each other and may limit what she could do. But you're right. I'm wondering, I mean, she's very smart, so she probably found a way around some things, I'm guessing.
And if she didn't, the writers will.
Right. And poor Harry Seldon locked in the vault, just wanting to have a physical body and live again. So
Yeah.
sad.
So what's going to be his breakout behavior in
I
the
know.
future? Okay, any last thoughts about Foundation Season 3?
Let me talk about a few things I think could be improved, or at least that stood out as potential areas for improvement. One is a very specific thing. I thought the ending when Dusk kills all the clones, I thought from a visual perspective and from a show perspective, if it was very dramatic for him to blow them all up and to have that scene. But why would they have explosives in them? It didn't make any sense. You could have just had if they wanted to have something like that, they could just had an off switch where it just kills the body and flushes them out. It doesn't need to explode and create this mess everywhere. That wouldn't make any sense. I think they should have shown him planting explosives, and then they could have the scene just as it was, without that kind of silliness. And let's see, when we see Dale confronting the actual mule at the end, Beta, I think is her name, she uses Magnifico's music against the mule, which I thought was great. But then next time we see her, she's just like running away for her life, from what I remember.
Yeah.
And
that didn't make sense.
Yeah, so like what happened there? Like if she had the mule Beta at her mercy, or she should have killed her, or we should have seen her struggling, and we should have seen Gale struggling and barely escaping with her life.
Right. And why wouldn't she take Magnifico with her?
Yeah, something. As it was, it looked like she should have had the opportunity to kill the mule. Last we saw, she was in the power position, and then she's running for her life, and that didn't make sense. So I think they wanted to leave it ambiguous, obviously, but there was no need for that. Just show us what happened and make that clear. So that was one thing. And then I'm not sure I fully buy the reveal of Beta as the mule. She just married some dude and was on a honeymoon on the planet she was taking over. Like, I don't know that I buy that. That's a little that's a little convoluted for that kind of plan. Unnecessary. And also, was the guy who we originally represented as the mule, was that her brother, or was it just some guy she met and she converted and used him because he was also a mentalic? I would have made that clearer. I don't think there was a reason not to. If it was her brother, show it, make it clear that, that was her brother and she was actually the one manipulating him. I could have bought that. If it was somebody else, make that clear. As it was like, who is this guy? Are they connected? I assume it was her brother, but I don't know. Like, they were both Mentalics.
Yeah.
Why would she be the one to have gotten one over on him? Yeah, that needed to be clear for me.
And I just kind of assumed that will happen in season 4. So hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
For me, what I didn't like is that this particular season was incredibly gory. I could have done without the gore.
Yeah.
There didn't need to be so much blood and gore and guts and brains and yuck. That just not, to me, that's not necessary for the storytelling, in my opinion. And that is, of course, my opinion.
No, I agree with you. It wasn't necessary. I think they were trying to make it shocking and horrific of like, hey, this is how things are going to go really bad, right? To just accentuate the awful nature of the fall of everything in that moment. But I agree. I don't think that it was necessary.
Any other thoughts?
I'm just blown away. I think the writing was phenomenal. I think I really hope people, if they haven't seen the show, give it a shot. I see a lot of comments online from people, when they're recommending sci-fi shows, and if this one pops up, people saying, oh, it's just a bastardization of Asimov's Foundation books. And I really hope and wish for those people to be able to get over that and just see it as its own thing.
Yeah.
Because to me, this is one of the best sci-fi shows that we've gotten. Certainly one of the best epic science fiction shows that we've gotten, if not the best. It's just phenomenal. And I'm really looking forward to the next season.
Yeah, me too. And I agree that, this is a different take. And I've not read the books, and I understand how people would be frustrated that it doesn't follow the books. But in of itself, by itself, it's really good science fiction.
Agreed.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in Foundation Season 3. Huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. Your support, noticed through every like and share, means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's themes, here's further readings. Michael's Tales of Zara series was inspired by the Arabian mythology of 1001 Nights. Start with the Golden Scarab of Balahar, an enchanting quest that will captivate readers who love magic, wonder, and strong heroines. Links are in the show notes if you'd like to explore more. The Stories Told podcast is available on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, drop a note on our YouTube channel, and that link is also in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in Haunted Mansion and start spooky season. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.